But good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Jackson III, founder of the Utah Black Chamber, and I'm excited and honored to have these esteemed guests here to kind of share in our webinar today, State of Utah Black Businesses. With me, I have our President and CEO, Dr. Sidni Shorter of the Utah Black Chamber. I have Alexi with the Hammered Copper, Trinity Johnson with the Pyramid Edge Consulting, and Melanie Davis with Planted Healing and Play. I forgot this, multiple businesses here. I should have asked which one you wanted me to identify you with. But we'll get to more of their bios here shortly. But what I like to do real quick is kind of share with you the history of the Utah Black Chamber, where our Black businesses are today, and then I'll turn the time over to Dr. Sidni Shorter to talk about, to get into our panel discussion. The Utah Black Chamber was founded in September 9, 2009, so a little over 13 years ago, with the premise of all chambers of commerce is to uplift the small business community, particularly the Black business community here in Utah. Many folks ask, like, why the importance of trying to start a Black chamber in Utah with the population so small? And my response is, of course, well, it's not a matter of the population size, it's a matter of the need in the marketplace. If there are businesses that are looking for the necessary resources in order to grow their business, then that purpose serves itself. Also, people are asking, why do you need a Black chamber instead of just participating in the other chambers? There are different issues and challenges that Black business experiences that non-Black businesses don't experience, and we'll get into that as we go into our discussion. Through that process, the chamber has now grown to over 300 members. We are a statewide organization with leadership in 5 different counties for growth. We are recently recognized through the U.S. Black Chambers to participate in the SBA Community Navigator Program, and through the presence of Dr. Sidni Shorter coming in April, has presented a national presence for the Utah Black Chamber, really catching the attention of the success we've been having. Not only to what we've been able to establish over the last decade or so, and just to the leadership of Sidni and all that she's accomplished, but really with what's been provided here in Utah with the collaboration and partnerships with a lot of you out there that are listening to this webinar, with people in corporations and in the public sectors. So it's been a great opportunity to work with these small businesses, identifying the resources and challenges. But what I wanted to share real quickly here before we get into our discussion through our esteemed panelists is some statistics. Is that the Black population has been at or below 2% in Utah for over the last decade. Whereas there are so many businesses here in Utah, the Black community only accounts for less than 0.5% of the businesses here, whereas white-owned businesses are 86% of the population. Through the pandemic, we've seen a lot of Black businesses close throughout the country. Where in Utah, we actually saw a shift where a lot of Black businesses started to rise. Notably so, one of the demographics is Black women-owned businesses. From 2014 to 2019, Black women businesses grew by 50%, and there's still the growth continuing today. There's been particular programs established in Utah for Black women-owned businesses, such as New Pattern, where the mentorship and grant program for Black women founders. And we've seen Black women leadership definitely elevate here in Utah. And so who we have here today is our panelists. They're all Black women-owned businesses, and I'm excited for this discussion. And we've lost Alexi, so hopefully we can get her back. And Nicole, she said to resend her the link. She's so sorry. Oh, here she comes. Just in time, Alexi, where we can go into the discussion regarding the state of Utah Black businesses. So at this time, I'll turn it over to our moderator, Dr. Sidni Shorter. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, James, and thank you for that background on Black businesses, especially from a female perspective here in the state of Utah. I am honored to be here to moderate this conversation with these amazing entrepreneurs and business leaders here in the state of Utah. So I am, again, Dr. Sidni Shorter, the president and CEO of the Utah Black Chamber of Commerce. And as a caveat to add here is that I too am an entrepreneur. I have an accounting and finance firm that I have stepped away from, but certainly understand the challenges and the benefits of being in this space. And so I look forward to navigating this conversation with you all. And so what I want to do is just kind of take a step back and give you each the platform to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business. And then we'll dive into some conversation about the state of Black business from your perspective. And I will start based on who I see on my screen first there. Ms. Melanie Davis, if you could start with your introduction and a little bit about your business.
Sure, thank you. My name's Melanie Davis. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor. We believe in mental health and integrative mental health and wellness, and I have 3 practices that I run. Play Therapy, which is a child and adolescent therapeutic space that provides psychiatric mental health care and other integrative mental health care to children 18 and under. And then I have Planted Healing, which is also an integrative space that we offer adult care, mental health care. And then Continuum Mind Body Collaborative, which is a yoga, nutrition, integrative healthcare place as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Looks like we lost Trinity. Oh, there she is. Trinity?
Yes, hi, thank you. My name is Trinity Johnson. I'm the owner of Pyramid Edge Consulting. It's an HR consulting firm that supports small businesses and entrepreneurs and just growing their businesses. Of course, the people operations portion of it. So my company does everything from payroll processing, employee relations, compliance, and benefits management. So we've been around for about 3 years now, and I have been in the HR realm for about 17 years, originally from Georgia and moved here prior military. And just happy to be on the webinar and share this space with the Utah Black Chamber, and it really overall excited to be here.
Oh, thank you, and Alexi.
Hello, everyone. No, I'm sorry you can't see my face, but yes, I am the owner of the Hammered Copper, which is a mobile bartending service in Utah, and the Cocktail Collective, which was just opened this last December, it's amazing to think we're coming up on a year. But I opened both of these businesses centered around the spirit and cocktail industry that I have worked in for now 14 years, and sharing my wealth of knowledge and my love of not only great cocktails and great spirits, but also great service. And it's really unique what we do, especially the Cocktail Collective. Our focus is really educating people not only how to, I don't want to say properly make drinks, but learn the classics, understand the connection to history and that beautiful and sometimes dark history, but also really appreciate and become better consumers and drinkers.
Thank you for that. And so I want to ask this question before we start, because based on what I'm hearing, each of you started your businesses here in Utah. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so that's interesting in itself, because the assumption is you had an opportunity to kind of survey the landscape and kind of understand the climate and culture you were stepping in from a business perspective. Trinity, I'll start with you. What were the things that you first considered that really motivated you to step into this space as a Black woman in Utah as an entrepreneur?
Well, it initially started right after I got out of the military. I was 23 years old and decided I wanted to open a daycare. So, and because Utah has a lot of families out here with a lot of kids, I was like, this is, be a great opportunity. I did have a daycare open for about 6 years, had 160 kids before I sold it. And then from there, I went into business management, different tech spaces, working as an HR manager and kind of growing within my career. Just with that visibility, I was able to see that there is just a lot of need out here in Utah, but it's a great place overall to operate and to start a business. There are a lot of opportunities here. We just have to figure out where they are and just take advantage of them.
Right. So what motivated you to keep moving? You said there are a lot of opportunities, but you were kind of focused on what you wanted to do and where you wanted to serve.
So, what motivated me was just my career in HR has been, very, very great. I started off as an office manager, and then of course owning my own business, and then transitioning into the HR field, learning compliance, learning benefits, going back to school, doing all of that. And as I was networking with different individuals who were wanting to start businesses, different entrepreneurs, I learned that a lot of people didn't understand their people operations, didn't know a lot about business and compliance, and just determining that need was here, that small business owners are great at their niche, they're great at the things that they know, but there's that large gap in their people operations and how they take care of their employees that they needed that support in. So I just knew it would be a great opportunity to start it here in Utah.
Okay, so we've kind of talked about that part, and I'm going to pose the same question to each you, Alexia and Melanie. So if you kind of want to think about, how you'll answer these questions. But I kind of want to stay here just a little bit, Trinity, because we've talked about the opportunities. You were motivated. It's about your expertise and what you could bring to the table. But then we know that being an entrepreneur and running a business poses many challenges. But what would you say, we're going to stay in that startup phase, right? Because we have to understand what helps people get beyond those barriers. What would you say was your first major challenge, and how did you overcome it or address it?
If we want to start off with the daycare, when I was 23, my understanding of the process was, of course, about just owning a business. I was very young, so that was one thing. There wasn't a lot of guidance. I went to the SBA to look for funding. The funding was a big issue. There wasn't a lot of funding there. I was given, regardless of my 700 plus credit score, they told me to buy a house and come back after I bought the house, and maybe they would be able to, give me a loan. And I'm like, my credit score is like 720. I don't understand what the problem is. So I literally, right before I was part of military, and right before I got out of the military, I deployed on purpose for 6 months to earn the funds, and saved up about $70,000 to open up my daycare. So that's what I did with that business. And then for Pyramid Edge, luckily it was more of me advertising myself and putting myself out there as a consultant to help grow my business. There wasn't a lot of funding that was needed. However, once I started to grow, which I grew rather rapidly within the first 6 months, funding to have better employees with more experience, funding to market my business and my website and develop it, to being able to have finance to be able to move forward with that.
Great, thank you.
So that was the biggest hurdle.
Okay, thank you. Alexi, if you could speak to what motivated you to understanding the landscape, what motivated you to step into the business and into this entrepreneurial space?
Absolutely. So what motivated me to step into this business and entrepreneurial space? So like I said, I've been working in the bar industry for quite some time. At the time, it was never really something I ever saw as my career. Most bartenders you see are that are older are career bartenders, but it kind of gave off the stereotype that they weren't going anywhere. But that really is anything but the truth. There are so many different branches in this industry, and the deeper you get, the more involved you get, and the more people you know, you really do have the full capability of creating your own branch. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. After working for several really difficult and honestly abusive employers, I needed to find a space that would not only support my creativity, but also that I could give philanthropically. I could, pass along my information. I could better my community. I could also, I could make a difference. And that really, I really did not foresee that being bartending of all things. But what I saw when I first started doing this, I first started freelancing, but I was noticing that a lot of the service out there and was really undiversified. And when I wanted to open this business, my goal was to not only provide a truly bespoke and crafted and catered experience, but also be able to diversify what was available to guests in their events. That was one of the big things. I mean, you always saw the typical menu being very, very simple, and you could tell the guests were getting bored. And so when I came on the scene, my goal, and every single time I promoted myself, was that yes, I am different, but I'm different because I'm putting me into my business, but also I'm putting my education and my skill in crafting cocktails, my in-depth research, but also my want to keep my business as green as possible. This industry is incredibly wasteful, and so doing everything we can to not only work with other businesses in our industry, but also trying to keep our footprint low on our waste, especially if we can reuse things and if we can source things ethically. We definitely want to, and so that was a big part of this business. And especially in a state like ours, we have so many eco-conscious people who absolutely love this idea and were more than ready to really support my business, and which was fantastic. The hard part was, I mean, my business opened in 2018, and we had gotten through that first year of business, and then 2019, and we again kind of ramped up a little bit, and then 2020 hit, and it was incredibly difficult. And one of the hard parts I saw was, especially being a woman of color in this industry, is I got talked down to a lot. Granted, I had, if not double, sometimes just a couple years more than my experience and my competitors, but it was really hard to explain to them, why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this just because I want to make a ton of money. It's not a ton of money kind of producing business quite yet, at least I like to think. But what inspires me to keep going and keep growing my business, especially to Hammer Copper, is the fact that I'm providing something that is completely different in the sense that we want to give the guests the catered experience. We want to make sure that they feel safe in their service, especially in a state that has such tough liquor laws. I've studied these liquor laws. I make sure that my service is abiding by these liquor laws, even if these liquor laws don't recognize my business as a licensed entity, because there's no license for mobile bartenders. So making sure that people know that their guests are going to have good drinks and a good time while also being safe was key for me. And then when it came to the Cocktail Collective, which was the brainchild during the pandemic, it was really important for me to it started off with me being able to share the direct connection of spirits and Black culture. Not many people know that almost all spirits that we enjoy today do have some sort of Black origin story. And so being able to share that history and be very honest about it, I'm very honest in that history. I do not cake it up or sweeten it for anybody's comfort. And more often than not, I have people who are so incredibly grateful and come to me after my classes, either crying or just shaking my hand saying, "Thank you so much. I learned something new today." And that to me is the biggest reward that I could possibly ask for, because I get to read about these amazing people, but then I get to share it more. And that's what inspired me just to it inspires and motivates me just to keep doing this.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that. What would you say starting out? I know you mentioned about, the communication, the lack of respect for being in the space, being in the industry. But to start the business itself, what would you say was your biggest challenge starting out?
My biggest challenge starting out was honestly when I started out, there were two major names in my industry that had kind of consumed the market. And it was really hard to get people to trust that I was not only not like them, that I provided a different service, but also that we would offer high quality service. I had some people who would call me up and be like, "Oh, we want to inquire about your service, but we just kind of want to make sure." And I kid you not, this is said to me multiple times on multiple calls. They said to me, "We just want to make sure that your service isn't ghetto. We want to really have a high class." And I knew that was tied to me being a person of color. And it was really hard to be diplomatic uh, during those phone calls and really just kind of bite my tongue, because I knew that those times that I could have had that event and shown them that I am an incredibly classy woman, but also I can provide incredibly classy service, that at the end of the day, that was not the client for me. And even though I lost that contract, I am okay with it, because there were going to be 3 or 4 more contracts down the road that I was going to get that would, praise my hard work. And so it was overcoming the stereotype, that was kind of built around, I guess, a Black-owned business in this industry, but also what was, I guess, out there already, and then also the fact that we were a baby business. It was really tough packing everything into the back of my Subaru when we were getting started. It was very rough, but I was able to eventually gather a great team that has helped support me. And more than anything, I've been able to really work on my confidence and stop comparing myself to other similar businesses in my industry, knowing, again, I built my business to not be like that.
Right.
And so to remind myself of that.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll lift up some of these points moving forward. Melanie, if you can, address the same question, what motivated you to understanding what the landscape looked like as a Black woman in Utah to step into this space to provide your business and services?
Sure. As I was exploring the idea of going into private practice, I think that really just was cultivated when I was working in another small group practice. And I saw things that were great and had some good mentoring. And I also saw things that I felt like I feel like I could do this differently, and uniquely, in a way that would reach more demographics of people that I did not feel were being met in the mental health space. And it took some time. I'm a very kind of calculated, take slow and steady wins the race kind of person. I typically have like a 5-year goal in mind, and I'm working backwards at a pace that just works for my life. So I took my time really looking into what it looked like to own a private practice. I wanted to do it the right way. I wanted to make sure I had every T crossed, every I dotted. And so a lot of time spent learning and listening to how others had started their private practices, but then also saving money, right? Because I knew one thing: I did not want to go into debt starting a business. And I did not want to venture into the financial business loan space for various reasons. Some historic around, loaning to Black businesses, and then also a part of I didn't want to have debt when I started my company. And so when I went into private practice, it had probably been a few years that I had just slowly been preparing to open, and that was in 2017. And then since have just kind of scaled. But I think there was a big piece of just taking my time and looking into what others had done that worked, um, and things that didn't work. But I didn't have any references of other Black owned businesses that were going to be similar to mine, um, because the nature of the few of the practices that I do own, they are the first to be owned by Black providers.
Wow. So what would, so you're very calculated, you're very methodical, you plan it out. But even in that, there was a challenge.
Oh,
So
sure.
what I know there may have been many, but what would have been one starting out that you would elevate here for us to hear?
I mean, if there was one that felt glaring and just like one of the most obvious obstacles when you're wanting to start a business is financing, starting the business, the overhead that's involved with finding a practice space. This was pre-COVID, so it wasn't that launch a practice that's telehealth, right? Connecting with human beings often happens in person in a mental health space, and it's evolved a great deal since, where people offer telehealth, and that's quite normalized. But when I opened, it wasn't. And the idea of having three small children and also contributing to my home, I didn't want to take away financially from my family. And so financing the idea of opening a private practice was one of the key pieces of planning that could have been easier if I may have known about different resources or grants, but it was not. So that was probably the most glaring potential obstacle, right? The thing that demanded more time and planning.
Right. So that aspect that you just highlighted, the whole financing aspect, we know that from a Black business standpoint, access to affordable capital funding, even if you're looking at raising capital, are some of our major challenges and hurdles. And what's very interesting is that what I'm hearing from these three women is that, we use the term bootstrap, right? Trinity, you mentioned that, starting out, you went the SBA route and thought that I absolutely qualify and I can afford it. And so when you are growing your business and you're thinking, of course, from a financial standpoint, and this is your first hurdle, and you know that I have to keep going, what are some of the tools that you could share with us that you used from a financial standpoint to really start and grow, and to this point sustain? What does that look like for you?
Well, for the daycare center, just being totally honest and transparent, because of the fact that I had saved the $60,000, I still wanted more funding. I was always concerned that, whether or not my company measured up to the other daycares that were already established within the area, whether or not I was going to have all the tools and all the resources and all the system management like all of these other daycares had. And it was very frustrating for me to know that the $60,000 that I had saved was basically going to cover this really expensive daycare equipment and nothing else. So the routes that I took to obtain financing were not the best routes at all. In fact, by the time I had sold my business, my finances were suffering. We were maintaining, I was paying my employees, but when it came to a profit from my business, that was where I suffered a lot. And as you do research on Black-owned businesses and women-owned businesses, they're growing at a rapid rate. But because we have to start off so small, because the financing is not there, we have less revenue. Our businesses are still smaller, and there's a higher failure rate. So I had made that decision to sell my company because I knew that if I did not, I was going to continue on this trend. Transitioning over to Pyramid Edge, I knew that I did not want to be in that space again. I had honestly given up on funding. for Pyramid Edge and having it grow that way. So I had to build it myself. And so I started off small. I started with one client, grew that one client to two clients, that two client to 16, 16 to 40. And, here we are today. So it has not been easy. And if I had access to funding, I'd probably be twice as big as what I am right now. But to me, there's just really not a lot unless she wants something with a ridiculously high interest rate, daily or weekly payment, something like that. It's just not there for us.
Right. So the cost of those funds are out of reach. And I think what's important that I hear that well, first of all, the cost of the funding, but also you're at risk because you really don't have the amount of capital that you need. And when we talk about economic ecosystems, especially for Black businesses, we are really those that are really the highest at risk when it comes to that. But yet you push forward. Melanie, talk about as a Black woman in business in Utah, when you reach that point of the resources really just don't look like they're here. Do you feel like you have viable options? If you do, what are they? And if you don't, then what do you do?
Or I think Trinity said it really nicely that, she could have been, that much larger, had that much more of space and been, 10 steps ahead of maybe where she is right now, which is incredible. I think it's amazing the way that you did handle it. And I really relate to that because I also did not feel like there was funding accessible. I didn't come from a family that was well off that would just pour $50,000 into a startup for me. My dad worked at the same job for his entire career. And so it was just kind of up to me to figure out how to fund it. And I think as a result, the scale of where I'm at now in my mid 40s, I kind of wonder where would this be now if someone would have said, I don't know, here's $50,000, here's $100,000, go and do the things I could have and would have done. And I think the trajectory would have, I would have been moving the same direction. It just would have been with a more rapid speed. And the result really would have been more widespread mental health care in Utah, right? Which is what we need, right? So, but instead, you kind of do these incremental growth markers that look different and take more time, especially as a woman who is a mother. And so there's other little pieces, right? Because there's factors economically that play into women in childcare and women in the workforce and financing. I mean, there's lots of different elements there that kind of slow your opportunity for growth. So financing is one of those. And so when I realized that that's just my reality, I wasn't sitting around stuck in that space, but I just recognized that as this is my path to get where I want to be, and it just made it slower, right? So we took less vacations and would put that money towards, we'd drive instead of fly, and that money was going towards us opening a new space or, renovating a new space. Anytime we open a new business, we start with a very small space and then scale as they grow versus going and saying, let's get an 8-office suite. We start with a 2-office suite, so that's kind of how that looks different, and how, I understand if I were to name it as an obstacle, that would be somewhat of an obstacle, but it just is what I know to be the path, right?
Yeah.
That's what's accessible to me.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you say it that way. And to some, it feels painful. It's like, this is just what I know is the path. This is just how I know I have to navigate it as a Black woman. And so we often talk about the economic ecosystem, and what both you and Trinity have both described are these obstacles and barriers that disrupt the economic ecosystem. It ends up costing the system something. When I hear you say, I could have grown this much. Well, growing this much means that that's an increase in revenue, right? That's part of the economy. I could have hired this many more people, right? And so that's ensuring that you're a vital part of the economic ecosystem. But when you deal with and have to encounter these barriers to affordable capital, it costs the economic ecosystem something. And so just wanted to point that out, is that that's how I hear it when you say that I could have been this big, or I could have hired this many people. I want to pivot now to Alexi, because you highlighted something, and we have a question from our audience on this, Alexi, because we talk about funding, right? We also talked about this whole aspect of respect and trust that comes with the territory.
Absolutely.
But then also you highlighted, and the question is around your comment about Black stereotyping. And the question is, what was the stereotype, and is it low expectation of quality and or competence, and how do you overcome that?
Boy. So yes, I mean, establishing, like I mentioned before, establishing trust, especially in a liquor-based business in a state that is already very tightly regulated, has already some antiquated laws in place, and it's very hard to work around that and be able to establish myself as not only a trustful organization, but also the authority in that organization, or not organization, in my industry. And more than anything, I had to learn this the hard way, is that it wasn't so much about going bigger and bigger and bigger every single time. It was consistency that provided trust. That was me putting my word into myself and my authenticity into my actions, and consistency is really where people began to trust my business. However, again, working around those stereotypes, the initial worry was always a lack of quality, a lack of consistency, a lack of basically like holding myself to a professional standard. Now, granted, I knew what those standards, the standards that they expected me to deliver, I wanted to, and I have every single time I've ever done an event, I've always made it my goal to exceed those standards that they have in their head, or exceed those expectations. And every single time I hear them tell me that my staff is so wonderful and kind, and they were so great to work with, and they just had so much fun at the bar, and it wasn't them getting drunk, it was them having great conversations with my staff, it was them having a great time, a professional time, but they felt like their guests, this was a memorable part of their event for their guests and for them. And to me, that was me repainting the stereotype that they had in their head. That was me not repainting the stereotype, that was me repainting the mindset for them of what Black women in especially the liquor industry can do. There are not a whole lot of us. And the ones who are working so hard to make a name for themselves or have their voices respected are doing so with such diplomacy and professionalism, and honestly an inspirational demeanor that I don't just look at them as people in my industry, I look at them as role models just in general, because of what they've been able to do and how they've been able to reset other people's mindsets. Because obviously I would not put my name, I mean, I think from anybody on this conversation, I would not put my name on something if I knew I couldn't deliver, and I would not put my name on something if I knew it wasn't quality. If I can't provide quality, I'm not going to be able to. I'm not going to do it. And it always meant the world to me for clients to be excited and have a memorable experience, and for them to want to come back. And I've had return clients for large events, which is wonderful, but it has been difficult to get to this point because of those pre-existing notions that I would provide something underwhelming or cheap.
Thank you for that. I'm going to kind of reel this in a little bit, because we talked about what motivated you. Then we talked about what were the challenges and how you overcame those. So now the question is, and I'll hop back to the middle of my screen here with you, Trinity. If there were three things, because we're keeping this conversation in the context as a Black business in Utah, and then we'll layer on top of that being a woman. What would you say would be the top three skill sets you have had to use to get to where you are today, considering what motivated you and what has challenged you?
Oh, that's a good question. Top three skill sets.
Or even mindset, because sometimes it's not even the skill set when it's around business, it's the mindset.
Oh, well, if we're talking about that, if we're talking about that, being motivated and trying to stay motivated when I have so many kids, and my husband and I have multiple businesses. Staying motivated and just being positive about the outcome of things has always been very difficult for me to do when the sky seems like it's falling when you own a business. So staying motivated has been the bigger thing. When I'm connecting and reaching out to different resources for funding or for assistance financially, I'm always nervous. And I have to realize that I need to just do it anyway. And whatever the outcome is going to be the outcome. And 99% of the time you get denied anyway. So you're starting from the ground up. So just trying to stay positive when you have those issues is always a challenge, but I feel like it's absolutely necessary. And then not necessarily a skill set, but just having the right resources and network behind you. I have worked with the Utah Black Chamber and the Black Success Center since I've opened Pyramid Edge, and they have been a tremendous help and support for me. And I've learned a lot just from being within that space and just continuously learning as I'm growing my business from other entrepreneurs and business owners and different things. So just being open to receiving the knowledge, the training, the support, the mentoring is just really important to me.
Thank you. Melanie, you can answer that question.
Sure. I remember to take that mute button off.
Okay.
So I would say from a mindset standpoint, keeping yourself encouraged and reminding yourself that there's room for you. I think when you are trying to enter the landscape of being a small business or owning your own business in a predominantly white area, I think there can be beliefs about there being room or space for us to be successful. So I think reminding myself and being committed to the idea that there's room for what I have to offer, being determined and patient, because it does take time and it does look very different from, maybe the way other people start their businesses. And then third would be excellence. I think it would be misleading to not suggest that often when we step into, as Black business owners, spaces where there is alternate offering or an alternate opportunity or a business that does the same thing that you do, that and this is in various capacities, right, for people of color, there's an expectation around excellence that I have for myself, as well as that I know I need to show up with, to build trust, preserve integrity, for people to know that they can count on me to deliver what it is that I'm saying. So I think it's always education and training is one notch above. Your what you deliver is one notch above, because that's just kind of our baseline that we typically need to operate on.
Awesome, thank you. Alexi?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like these ladies have already said everything I fully agree with. But I would say one of the big things for me was learning to constantly be able to refocus my mindset on a whim, because I did have the hard time of constantly comparing myself to my competition, not feeling good enough when I lost a contract. So definitely, you know, reframing that that mindset for myself constantly, so I could get myself ready to conquer the next one. I would also say being able to, oh, how do I put this? I would say again, I've said this a couple times, being diplomatic. I really had to learn when, you know, a client or wanted something that wasn't feasible or possible, um, not only giving them an alternative, but explaining to them why. And when they didn't like that answer, going into in depth with that, and just again being diplomatic when they saw that as my fault was the reason why it couldn't happen, and just being very calm, and of course being that ultimate professional self. Lastly, I would say having the mindset to rally. This is going to be a weird one. I would say have the mindset and honestly the physical stamina to rally, because events are exhausting. These are events that the service time is like 7 hours and the setup is maybe 2.5 to 3 hours. That doesn't include pack time and purchase time. And knowing that I can keep going and that I have a great team behind me, these are the things that have kept not only me going and me loving what I do, even at the times when I want to pull my hair out, but have helped me grow my businesses to something even bigger, and even more beautiful from when they started.
Right. Thank you. So what I've heard, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I'm going to yield the time to you all, and then we'll transition back to James. But what I've heard and understood is that you were clear about what you wanted to achieve, but you were also clear about who you are, and your purpose and who you intended to serve, but most importantly, your why. Your why has resonated through many of your responses here. And so in this context of the state of Black business in Utah, I would like for each of you to give me like your closing statement on how you have become successful based on the state of Black business in Utah. How we understand kind of the path of getting here, but if you had to put that in a context and put a bow on it, not a box, but just put it in context. And your answer, what I'm looking for is that your answer should really reveal the state of Black business in Utah based upon your success. I'll start with you, Melanie.
Thank you. I would say, you know, people spend a lot of time kind of shining a light on the obstacles. So I love that you're kind of pointing this piece out, is that it is wonderful to be a Black-owned business in Utah. I don't want to be like everybody else, right? And so I think it's incredible to have the support and collaboration from community, because even though we might be small, we are mighty in Utah, and you feel that love and support from your own community. And it feels that much greater to know that you're giving back to your own community also. So connection and support from community is a great enhancement to Black-owned businesses in Utah.
Awesome, thank you. Trinity?
Don't accept being the underdog. A lot of people are going to not necessarily support you the way that you want to, or look for you to fail. But I think it's very important for Black business owners to acknowledge the fact that we have earned our seat at the table. We have definitely pushed through a lot of barriers, and building these businesses is extremely important. It's important for our community. It's important for the community as a whole. So just accept that and live within that moment and live within that ability and do the best that you absolutely can.
Thank you, Alexi. And then we'll go to James.
Absolutely. I would say that Black women entrepreneurs are the true face of what it means to live the American dream, to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, to create something out of nothing. Black women entrepreneurs are that. And as a biracial woman, as a Black business owner, as a supporter of other Black owned businesses, I wholeheartedly lived that every single day. And I know that there are times when people will show up to my business in full support saying, absolutely, I wanted to support your business. I want to see you grow. And I will have people who don't necessarily fully understand why I do what I do. But every single day that I have the opportunity to do what I love, I know that I'm living, I am fully living that American dream that I was always told would be difficult for me to have. And look at me now with two businesses that are successful, and I have the opportunity to share that with people and guide other women of color to be able to do this. And that is amazing. That is the dream. And I'm so grateful and constantly in awe that this is what I get to do.
Thank you, Alexi. Thank you to each of you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson?
Well, I must say this is everything that I expected and more. I appreciate the time, Alexi, Trinity, Melanie, and of course, Sidney, for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I understand as a small business, particularly as a Black-owned small business here in Utah, as we, the Black Chamber, serve this small population that, you're not only the CEO, but you're sometimes your own administrative assistant. You are the secretary, you're the janitor, you're the receptionist, you're everything sometimes to your small business. So I know the time is valuable, but what I felt was valuable for everyone here was to listen and understand not only the challenges, but how we wrap this up and why you're doing the business here, why it's successful, and it's just so exciting to see so many Black businesses coming up here in Utah. And we look forward as the Utah Black Chamber to serving more of them, and anything that we can do to help you grow, please reach out to us. We appreciate everybody listening in to the webinar this afternoon. I hope you had some takeaways, and please reach out to these small businesses as they're not just looking for clients, but the support, resources as well is always helpful. Utah Business, I appreciate your partnership for this webinar. And with that, I'll go and any last remarks from you, Sidney?
Well, I would like to acknowledge one last question that was here that I missed. And so if we have just a few moments to do that, we want to be respectful of everyone's time. And the question was, with the Black community demographics at 2%, for a business to be successful, it has to pull from the other 98%. How do you do that? Anyone want to jump in and,
That's a good one.
Tackle that one?
I can share.
Go ahead.
Mental health, it is impacting 100% of the people in Utah. So reaching out, and I think being just culturally fluent. I think when you live, and I grew up here in Utah in Salt Lake, just near the university. I left and then came back. I think you become very culturally fluent, and I think you connect with community and be a space that's inclusive for all to feel like they can connect and be a part of what you're doing. Welcome allies, and just create an inclusive environment at your business.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you so much.
I can go as a small business. Well, there's over 30 million small businesses within the United States as of right now. So most of those need HR. So I started my company in the middle of the pandemic, and because of the fact that everyone has outsourced a lot of, or not outsourced, well, outsourced and are now utilizing remote employees, it's just been very important and helpful for my business to grow. So yeah, that was pretty much it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would say for me, if I may add to this, again, it is showing up and delivering and exceeding expectations. And granted, it is a lot of word of mouth for my business in particular, but I love honestly seeing people be surprised every single time I talk about spirits and they see my face light up. It is sharing my passion and my love for spirits, and that is how people seem to show up for me. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. But I would also say that I will never stop talking about what I love to whoever is willing to listen. And that seems to cross boundaries.
Awesome. Thank you. James?
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you all so much for participating in today's webinar, brought to you by Utah Business Magazine. I appreciate your partnership with these webinars, and looking forward to our partnership going forward. Thank you to Melanie, Trinity, Sidney, and Alexi for participating this afternoon, and hope the rest of y'all have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
I'll have the recording up soon.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.